Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. Now, if you're a CMO right now, there's a very good chance that in the last week, if not today or a week ago or 2 weeks ago, your CFO walked into your office and said, I don't want to make you panic, but there's a pretty good chance that there will be budget cuts. We got to do some belt tightening. We don't know what's happening on the horizon. So, you're used to doing more with less. So off you go, and the nature of those cuts, I can't give you a real projection on. The conversations I've been having with CMOs. Some of it's 20%, some of it's 50%. I mean, some of the cuts are pretty deep. It depends on the category. So at this moment, you're saying, how do I make more with less? What are the options? And my guest today is Jeff Atkinson, and he is this founder of an SEO company. And the reason why I wanted to have Jeff on the show right now is I believe, and of course Jeff believes, that SEO is probably one of those things that if you haven't looked at it lately as a CMO, there may be some low-hanging fruit. So with that, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Great to be on.
Hey, so it is one of those things that I think a lot of CMOs, they know it's important, but it hasn't been a priority necessarily, at least in the last year or so. They've been working on brand, they've been developing their demand generations, they've been getting their content programs in order, and SEO is there, but why now do you think it's so important that CMOs at least start asking questions about, hey, how's our SEO doing?
Yeah, I think that it sort of is something that should always be important, but now it's becoming important because of all the budget cuts. Everyone's taking a step back and they're saying, just what you mentioned, how can I do more with less? How can I take my current assets and get more traffic and more revenue as a result of them? So it's always important. It's just highlighted now because budgets are getting cut. And when you cut a very sort of paid heavy marketing mix, you get a really big hit. And if you were really strong on SEO before this, you're probably going to weather the storm pretty well because the searches are still happening. People are still, looking for things, and it doesn't go away, right? If I had to cut my marketing budget by 50%, my SEO traffic really isn't going to be impacted. So I think these types of crises make people realize that how important SEO is as a channel, and that over the long term, it's really stable, it's really successful, it's the best new customer driver. And so it's kind of come to the forefront of people's minds and thinking, all right, I need a long-term strategy around this in order to really be stable and sort of bulletproof.
So it occurred to me, some of the CMOs listening would say, yeah, Drew, we got this. We've been thinking about SEO. We're not idiots. We know it's important. And in fact, we're ranking pretty high on some of our important keywords. But it occurred to me as you were talking that a lot of them right now are thinking about what product can we get into the market tomorrow or in the next week. Like my recent guest on TalkDesk, they got Kathy Johnson, they got a product in the market in 7 days. Now, they had no SEO program for business continuity because business continuity didn't exist as a searchable term more than, a month ago. People weren't really talking about it. So let's take this as if you were about to launch a new product. And so you had to start from scratch to sort of identify the keywords and so forth. Where would you start if you were in those circumstances?
So business continuity is a great keyword. I mean, it just started trending as a keyword March 11th. So that's sort of the fluidity of the search world. I always like people to start with keyword research. And I know it sounds sort of mundane, but it actually can teach you a ton about your own business and what people call things that you sell, and also can create opportunities. So if, say, you found a keyword with really low competition but high volume, this is sort of my story from Overstock and why we moved into the furniture business, was that at the time no one was really, all the retailers were big box retailers that weren't playing online. So Overstock became this home and garden company strictly based on keyword research. Now, I'm not saying change your whole business model, but it's worth looking at and refreshing, especially when there's trying times and people start searching for different stuff. You might already have assets, you might already have pages and things built that actually could really function well in terms of getting rankings that are really applicable for your business and driving customers, and some subtle tweaks to the hierarchy of the site, the navigation of the site, how you're writing content can all of a sudden generate, an opportunity for your company in the form of an SEO channel. So I think a lot of it right now is honestly doing really smart keyword research. And then you're not just going to magically rank for these terms. So you have to start thinking about how the site's structured and what pages are we going to build. And have I built stuff already in the past, like you have, for example, that's very usable and can actually get customers coming in.
So I think this is, since you mentioned it, it's a good time, and it's also sort of a moment of full disclosure. So the way I got to know Jeff went like this. His PR team contacted, or his head of marketing contacted me and say, hey, I think Jeff would be a great guest on the show. I said, I don't tend to interview people, the specialists, but I said, let's talk. So Jeff and I started talking. And as he was talking about SEO, I said, you know what, before you go on the show, why don't you do some SEO for Renegade? So let me tell you about that for a moment. So we had created a B2B brand strategy report, which some of you have seen. I've talked about it on the show a little bit. Pretty comprehensive 12,000 word thing. And we had been gathering backlinks on the show as a result of some placements. I'm not on the show, I'm out in the world. And we had moved from nowhere to about page 12, and then we were on page 2 of Google. At that point, we started to work with Huckabuy. And would you believe it, with a few tweaks, subtle tweaks, as he's talking about, those very things, within about a week, we were on page 1. And I think we're like currently 2 or 3 for B2B brand strategy. So I'm not saying this was easy or happened overnight, because we had a lot of other things in place, but we were able to rank for that keyword. Now, recognizing that, let's talk about that a little bit just on that program. What should people, so that was good for us, but I would imagine a big company would want to rank for a lot of these terms. So, it starts to get complicated. You can't create a report like I did for all these things and then go out and get all that content for all these things, can you?
Well, you were sitting in a really good position. Huckabuy, so we are software, and we layered our software on top of your already great content, and it popped, which was awesome, and it was great to see. But in a lot of ways, you'd done all the heavy lifting. To have that content piece and the backlinks that you had, that was a great asset that we just sort of made look really pretty to Google, and they grabbed it, right? And they brought it up to the top. So that is what happens, is a lot of times you will have done a lot of heavy lifting, but if without sort of the expertise or in-house technical SEO, your content might not be working for you as hard as you'd like it to from an SEO perspective. So that was a great example of really great content, great work already there, and then making some technical adjustments that made the piece more visible to Google. And that's really all that Huckabuy did. We added structured data to the page, really good structured data. We did some things with your navigation, I know, and boom. So I would encourage people, I think now is a great time. Structured data, for example, especially in the B2B world, you might have tons and tons of content assets, but Google sort of still scratches their head as to what these pages are about. With structured data, which is this authoritative language that Google really likes to speak, you're telling them for facts, this is a B2B brand strategy document, and you can give them the facts, and as a result, you start to get more SEO traffic as a result of those content pieces. So there are some adjustments. I think most good B2B companies already are sitting on huge content assets. And so my encouragement is, well, let's just make it more visible, more understandable, more digestible for Google, and you'll start reaping the benefits of that, just like Renegade did. You are a bit of a unique case in that was a really nice piece of content that we got to work on. But yeah, that stuff happens, and happens at scale across big companies like SAP, Salesforce. We've seen it happen.
So for a bigger company, you would, instead of just like in our case, that we were just trying to rank for one word and or one term to see if we could, and sure enough, we succeeded. I'm imagining again, and we've worked with clients where they have 100 keywords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our typical keyword list is in the thousands.
Thousands. Okay, that's good perspective. So thousands. And is the goal in all these times ultimately to rank on the first page for every single one of them?
It is. It's always to rank number one.
Right.
But it has to be done in a scalable way. So
Right.
if you just pick keywords one by one and go after them, it works at a very high level. Like if you have a bread and butter keyword, like I bet Zoom right now with video conferencing, right? They're just driving tons and tons of revenue. We had like sheet sets and memory foam mattress topper, like they were getting just enormous amounts of revenue through them. So that's when you get to those sort of really competitive terms, you do have to literally go one by one and have a strategy and backlink strategy, what you're going to do. But I like SEO that's much more scalable. So how do we dynamically create pages? How do we generate pages with user-generated content so I don't have to write everything? How do I leverage content assets that are out there? I'll give you an example of what we're doing at Huckabuy. So at Huckabuy, I've been on probably 40 podcasts over the last 12 months. And we decided, let's transcribe all of those podcasts and make that content crawlable and indexable for Google. And we'll give the transcripts to the podcast hosts, and we'll use them ourselves if we get permission. But there's a way where I've already done a bunch of work that I can now leverage all that content in a crawlable way. So right now, Google knows about these podcasts, but they don't know of the actual content. They can't actually crawl a podcast unless you transcribe it. And us transcribing it allows them to now be able to see and index all that information, which is a really scalable idea. So there's one way that I like to sort of think about it is, what assets do I have that I can, generate traffic across a huge number of pages instead of just one by one?
Yeah, let me ask you a question about that, because it just, this is, I've recorded at least 180 episodes, and we're not posting the transcripts to our website. We do abbreviated Q&As. Are we just missing is that a huge loss on our part?
I think it's I don't think of it as a loss. I think it is a great opportunity. Why not? Yeah. That's great hard work. You spoke those words, you asked great guest stuff. Unless you're listening, you don't get Google can't listen. So it'd be great for you to transcribe and make that information available. Okay,
there it is. Another section for renegade.com, the podcast transcription section, because it gets complicated. But all right. So that's an example of, you've been on the podcast where those are generating organic traffic to your site. You found that that's a good place for. How about another? I think another example would be great.
Sure. You want it to be B2B?
Yes, please.
All right. Here's a great one. So, software company, SAP is the particular company. They opened up a developers central. That was basically Q&A. It was a ability for developers to come in, ask questions, have SAP developers answer them. Ended up becoming an enormous piece of their site. They really hadn't thought of it as an SEO opportunity. Huckabuy came in, we added our structured data, we leveraged SEO's cloud. It's now one of their top inbound drivers. People asking questions about SAP software. They flow through this section of the site, and it ends up generating tons of leads for them, believe it or not. So there's one that's totally hands-off almost, right? Other than setting up this forum essentially and just letting developers ask questions. It just grew into a really big driver for them, and was an asset that they already had in place but weren't leveraging yet. And so just a couple tweaks, structured data, SEO cloud, some navigation optimization, boom, all of a sudden they've got this jackpot of an SEO resource.
Wow. Okay, perfect place to take a break. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew, and I wanted to have a quick conversation about turning lemons into lemonade. Here are the lemons: skiing, Park City, January 11th, third day, last run, going fast. Light was bad, a lot of snow on the ground. 50 yards from the bottom, I crashed and burned. Literally tumbling down the mountain, did a 3-point landing with my head and 2 thumbs. Broke the right thumb, sprained the left thumb, finished up surgery 5 days later, And now I have a little extra time on my hands. What do? I finish a special report that I've been dying to finish for a long time, which is a way for me to get to my next book. It's a preview of the book. You can find it on renegade.com. On the very beginning of the homepage at the top, there's a banner that says B2B Special Report. I would love it if you took a look at this and let me know what you thought. I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. Okay, we're back, and we've been talking about SEO success. This is, and the way I see it is, you may already have the content on your page. You may already just, and maybe even have some of the inbound links that you were looking for, but there's something. And so that you're missing. And part of this is, I'm wondering, will they be able to see it on their own, Jeff, or obviously that you guys do this for a living, but maybe you could give some other insights into how someone could do this on their own.
Mm-hmm. Usually the keyword research process is where the ideas start coming from. So, start thinking about what would you like to rank number one for? Just create a spreadsheet. Try to come up with 10, 15 things. Go to Google Keyword Planner, which is the best sort of keyword suggestion tool. Enter them in there, come up with keyword ideas. It'll give you a list of thousands, and then your brain will start churning. And if you do it as a group, it's actually kind of fun because you end up realizing all these epiphanies about your business, that people call things differently than what you're calling them or you're naming them. And that's really where the idea generation starts, especially if you do it as a team. You'll start to think about these keywords and how it applies to the content you have. Do you have a page dedicated to this keyword? Is it in your navigation? Can Google easily find it? Pretty logical steps. That's what's so nice about SEO. It's very logical. It's very customer friendly, helps you learn about the business. So that's where I'd kind of start, and that will most likely generate ideas. If you look at, 1,000 keywords relevant to your business, and you see the volumes and you see the competition scores, you're going to start to think about content that you have, pages that you have, optimizations that could be done, including some of these keywords in your header. I guarantee that the wheels will start turning and you'll have some low-hanging fruit to go attack quickly.
So I think the idea is keywords and cocktails. And this is right? This is a virtual meeting.
Beautiful.
The CMO calls and says,
Mm-hmm.
you get your SEO person or people, they pull it up and we start going through the words. What I love about this and the way you described it, I can imagine one, because the CMO may or may not have actually looked at the list before. Some probably many have, but let's say they hadn't. It does give them a different way of thinking about the business. That's sort of part one. I think there's also a part two. I wonder if a new product ever comes out of this.
Well, it sure does most of the time. It really does. I will be honest. And maybe not even a new product, but a new name for a product. This is one of the biggest mistakes I find CMOs make is they love to name software products or whatever the B2B product they're selling, some snazzy thing that they've just come up with instead of what it actually is. We went through this process with Concur. They have an expense management software, so let's just call it that. And sure enough, they crush it now for all those keywords. So absolutely, there's tons of product ideas.
I want to talk about that because one of the things that if you read the B2B brand strategy report, you'll see that we push very much branded house, one major brand with a lot of descriptions. And part of the reason that we push for that is Google and the fact that you can't afford to build all these other brands that people are going to remember and know. So if you can, and it sounds like there's actually some real evidence as opposed to just conjecture that if you have a primary brand name, like Adobe or Concur or whatever, and then your sub-brands are all essentially functional. You still have a brand, but you've made it a lot easier for people to find that. And how much easier are we talking about, by the way?
If you don't call it what people call it, Google has no way of knowing. It's like, here's a really silly example, but 10 times more people search for sheets than search for sheet sets. and almost everybody calls them sheet sets. So just we at Overstock called them sheets. Probably B2B is the biggest offender, though, of this. You've invented a product, and so you want to call it your own name. Mm-hmm. And you're right, though. You can still call it your own name. You just need to supplement it and give Google some direction on what this product does. And it's amazing how little time CMOs spend on the very important piece. Your average B2B company gets 64% of their traffic from organic search. And just to put that in perspective, their social generates 3% and their paid search generates 12%. So you think about, okay, combined, that's 15% versus 64, and think about the amount of time spent on paid search and social versus all the things we're talking about today. So if you really want to move the needle on a low, small budget, putting this time in and focusing on organic for a few months while the world kind of calms down and this madness goes away, it's going to be really good, well time spent. And it's going to move the needle a lot.
Interesting. So I see a whole project here, and this becomes a lot more interesting to, I think, the CMO. When suddenly they say, I'm looking at my product portfolio. We've come up with all these jazzy names. We haven't put the basic descriptors, and we're nowhere near getting the kind of search that the more generic described ones that people are searching for. So we're just losing out. So it could be as simple as take your snazzy name and say expense report blank, right? Or whatever it is, as opposed to putting all their energy. And it happens when you do your navigation, right? So if I say products and then I list these fancy names and I don't also tag them with what they actually are, you're essentially saying that these products are invisible. Is that right?
Yeah, Google's going to have no idea. And that's why when we start working with B2B, they always get the highest growth rates, because Google is literally just confused. So they just don't understand what the company's selling. And I love your keywords and cocktails, because that makes it fun. And it doesn't sound like something fun, but when you get into it, you learn a ton. The simple task of literally going through and picking your number one keyword that you're interested in and looking at the volumes and looking at the competition scores, so you actually know exactly how human beings search for your product. It's probably not aligned with your website. So yeah, it's a really low hanging fruit, fun kind of team building thing to do during times where everybody's isolated, and we can get on a video chat at 5 o'clock, have a cocktail, and everybody brings some keywords and make it like a little competition. Who can have the highest volume, lowest competition score keywords, and then let's go after it as a team and get that traffic.
And it really is a team sport, because I've seen that. We needed our web person. Obviously, we needed content. We needed to write articles and get those placed. In some cases, it was the help of a PR firm that was excellent at doing that. In fact, shout out to our friends at Adigy for that good work, getting all of this content out there, linking back to ours. Great place for us to take a break. We'll be right back. I'm back. I'm not going to talk about skiing, but I do want to talk about the special report that you will find on renegade.com. There is so much meat in this, in the 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy in 2020, that there are probably some folks out there that think I'm crazy to put that out there in front of a firewall. But I'm really hoping to get feedback from some of you all on the report, perhaps what's missing, because again, the book is going to be developed against this outline, but fleshing it out. There might be some guests that could help fill in some of the areas. You may disagree with some of the things. I'm really interested in your opinion on this piece, and your engagement with it will really help make the book that much stronger. So you'll find it on renegade.com. Very top, there's a banner that says 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy. Take a look. All right, we're back. So we're going to have keywords and cocktails, and we're going to do it. So that's part A of this thing. And I think part B of it is one of the goals that we preach a lot on the show is radical simplification. Well, if ever there was a time to simplify, now would be the time, because you can't afford to have multiple messages. You just can't put the paid dollars behind it. So radical simplification means going through your product list and looking at them. If you have a drop-down menu, product or service that you've spent a lot of time trademarking and building names, and really thinking about, do I need all of these, first of all? And are they visible on search? And are we doing ourselves a disservice? Now, what's interesting is the brand person in me is going to say, and I can hear them, they're saying, but Drew, that's what makes us different. No. That's not, I'm not saying your product doesn't need to be unique and be informed by service. I'm simply saying that if you are putting extra energy in a sub-brand that someone can't find, this is the time you're really going to feel the pain. And so think about differentiation, not on the name, on the sub-brand name, but on the parent brand name, and how you're going to put all your energy into that parent brand, its value proposition, its purpose on a very simple level. And then these other products or services live under the umbrella on a more generically named Google-friendly basis. So anyway, I'm done preaching. I'm wondering, I'm wondering, Jeff, if you have, any sort of, let's give some top 3 things. We've done the keyword thing. We've talked about some architecture. Maybe you could just a little bit on what does your software actually do and add to the process?
Sure. So our software is focused on the technical side of SEO, which I found to be maybe the most important piece of SEO. It's how well does the site speak to search engines? And we do 2 things. One is we have a product that automates structured data markup. Structured data markup is the language that Google likes to speak. It's not only helps Google understand each page, but they use it. They use it when you search for a recipe and the recipe shows up, or a sports score. All those enhancements to search results are powered by structured data. And then the other thing that we do is we make sites really fast and really easy for Google to read through a thing called dynamic rendering that allows us to basically make a copy of the site that doesn't have any JavaScript, any of the things that kind of makes Google stop and get hung up. All those are eliminated into a simplified version of the site, sort of like AMP, accelerated mobile pages, a simplified version with structured data. It's cached at edge using Cloudflare. So the pages load in like 100 to 300 milliseconds, and it just makes the site downloadable in a really quick way, which then Google rewards you. So we're handling the technical side of SEO. All these other pieces, we are not an agency, we're a software product. So we do make suggestions like we're talking about here today, but this is really just speaking Google's language. And if you give them what they want, we call it Google's perfect world. Let's build a site so it's just what they want. If you give them what they want, they reward you.
That's awesome. Okay. And it's huckabuy.com.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So I think the key goal of this episode was to raise this, if it wasn't already, and you were looking for some low-hanging fruit that might make a huge difference, it's worth to do the keywords exercise. I will call it cocktails and keywords. That's number 1. Number 2, probably time to do an audit on your website just to make sure that you're not, as you're saying, you're as close to Google perfect as you can be. And with that, Jeff, thank you for joining us on Renegade Thinkers Unite.
Thanks, Drew. It's my pleasure. That was great.
Super, really fun. Enjoyed it. And to all my listeners, I hope you're hunkered down someplace safe and enjoying a different kind of podcast experience, in that you're probably not commuting. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.